Raf Sanchez, our correspondent who is in the region for us tonight. And Raf, you know, the president, Monica laid it out there, these two tracks. One, escalation potentially militarily, threatening to go after these critical Iranian sites. On the other hand, two, he's suggesting that there are talks, negotiations, a diplomatic track that is possible, even when Iranian officials haven't indicated the same thing. We saw that new letter from the Iranian president that seemed to strike a more conciliatory tone, but it is not at all clear that that's how the rest of the regime feels.
Yeah, that's absolutely an important distinction, Hallie. The Iranian president is not somebody who had a lot of power before the war. He really does have very little power today. So as you say, he put out this kind of interesting 1,000-word letter. It was addressed to the American people in English, and it was clear that he at least wanted the U.S. public to hear something from Iran in English before this address by President Trump. He said that Iran bears no enmity towards the United States. He said the world is at a crossroads between escalation and between engagement. Now, that would suggest that he at least is open to diplomacy, but he is not the one making the decisions on the other side of the Persian Gulf in Tehran. That is, as far as we can tell, some combination of senior officials inside the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, who is himself a former Guard commander, a hardliner, and the circle, at least, around the new Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, who, of course, we have not heard from in the weeks since he was installed.
Right.
Hallie, I will tell you, the phrase that I think is going to be jumping out at U.S. allies here in the region from the president's address tonight is that the Strait of Hormuz, in his words, is going to open up naturally at the end of this war. That is just not the understanding of anyone here in the Gulf. And it is really just worth sketching out to viewers what the situation in the Strait was before the war and what it is now. Before the war, about 110 ships passing through every day. And it was in everyone's interest for those ships to go. Iranian oil was coming out, Iraqi oil, Saudi oil, Qatari gas, passing through a recognized passageway through the middle of the Strait of Hormuz. Today, something like 5 to 10 ships are passing through every day, and those ships are no longer going unmolested through the middle of the strait. They are being forced into Iranian waters between a series of islands. This has been nicknamed the Tehran toll booth. The Iranians are inspecting these ships as they come by. They are charging some of them $2 million to pass through. And every indication is that the Iranians want to make this into a long-term arrangement even after the war continues. And so the idea that the United States is going to step away and basically leave the Iranians in control of the Strait of Hormuz in the hope that they are just going to naturally give up this level of control that they have asserted, that is going to be very, very worrying for people here in the Middle East when they wake up in a couple of hours' time. Hallie.
And it also, Raf, I think, speaks to the degree of potential political pressure that the president faces here at home, with gas prices now hitting that dubious milestone here in the U.S., national average above $4 a gallon. When you look at what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz, as we see some of the numbers there, Raf, and this idea that the president has suggested even today at a closed-door Easter event, the White House posted video, pulled it down, but he suggested he would be fine with staying. He has a desire for oil, for the region's oil, but he doesn't think that the American people have the patience to wait that out. I mean, it's a dynamic that is important for him domestically, but also, as you point out, internationally with allies, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Monica said, the president has this habit of saying the United States doesn't use the Strait of Hormuz. It's much more important to countries in Europe, countries in Asia. The reality is oil is a global market. If there is a scarcity of oil anywhere in the world, it is going to affect the price that Americans pay at the pump. Another line that the president has been laying out is that the Iranians' ballistic missile and drone production capacity has been crippled, has been severely degraded. They are certainly not firing as many drones and missiles as they were at the beginning of the war, Hallie, but people here in the Gulf do not feel that they are facing a crippled Iran on the other side of the fairly narrow Persian Gulf waterway here. Just this morning, an Iranian cruise missile hit a Qatari oil tanker not very far from where we are. Yesterday, a Kuwaiti tanker in the port of Dubai was hit by a drone. In neither case were there any injuries, and thankfully no major environmental spill. But it is very, very clear Iran retains the ability to threaten its neighbors, to threaten international shipping, and the idea that they have lost the ability to fire missiles, to fire drones, it just does not reflect reality, Hallie.
Raf Sanchez live for us tonight in Doha. Raf, I'm glad to have you in the region.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.